Hey, hello, good people. Welcome to another episode of The Flow. And, in order to go with the flow, it helps to understand the flow. And I'm going to do something a little bit different today because normally, as you all know, in most podcasts, you have a guest on and you do a little introduction of the guest and then you do your thing. And then at the end, the guest says, how to get in touch with them. And yeah, they offer if they've written a book or they have a blog. And then that's when you come in and say what it's about. But I'm going to change that up a little bit this time because I am so impressed with the blog that our Ann Mitchell has. Notes from the front, and she just puts out a terrific blog and has a network of folks that come on and speak on her blog, and what she reports on is just so darn helpful. Especially if I can steal a line from The Godfather, especially since her interests do not conflict with my own. Because although we both are talking about edgy, things that are happening in the administration, she's really telling us, what's going on from an insider's view, from behind the scenes of what's happening in the news on a very, very daily basis, what's happening today, and keeping us up with current stuff. My flow, of course, what I'm always trying to do is to kind of go underneath and say, what is the foundational stuff that this plus runs on? So between what I try to touch on and what Ann tries to touch on, I think we create an entire picture. So Ann, I can't tell you how much I love your blog. Notes from the front, everybody. You should check it out. And Ann is a colleague, a fellow attorney, fellow professor. We both teach. We both explore the law. And I want to start off, and rather than going through your bio first, I want to ask you a question
Sure.
to start. And the question is, what is the heartbreak that led you to take on the incredible difficult task of creating a platform and a blog and a podcast? What was the heartbreak that led you to decide to put out that kind of energy?
Well, Bob, first of all, thank you for throwing such an easy question at me right out of the gate. And of course, I need to thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. And as you said, I think that we together are sort of the whole ball of wax. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm delighted to be here. The heartbreak for me was when I was on social media starting last January 2025. And I started seeing my followers just completely freaking out and so scared and so discombobulated, so just running around not knowing what was going on. And there was so much misinformation out there that they were believing, and it was causing them to be traumatized.
Mm.
And that was breaking my heart because I knew things were bad and likely to continue to be bad, but not as bad as they were being told and led to believe. And it was coming at them from both sides because, on the far right, of course, the MAGA group were delighted with not only what was starting to go on, but what they believed would continue to go on. But the far left was also saying, how horrible it was. So they were getting it from both sides and caught in this middle where they were paralyzed with fear. And and so I started just addressing that. I would see a follower say something and I would say, no, that's, the big one. Or the big ones, I would say, towards the beginning were, that he was going to cancel elections and that he was going to use the Alien and Sedition Act to arrest people, and that he was going to put the country under martial law. I mean, these were rumors that were gaining so much strength that you and I both know that there's really no way he could do any of that. But people believed it. And it was coming from the right because they believed it, because he was saying it and he was their leader. And it was also coming from the left because from the very far left, it helped to foment this misinformation because they wanted to get, they wanted people to wake up. And so that was the heartbreak. That was, where I felt called to start explaining, because I was so fortunate to have the background. As you mentioned, I'm an attorney, have been for many decades, a law professor, so have that sort of, have been able to develop and exercise the skill of explaining these concepts, in words that people can understand. And, so I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that was the heartbreak I was dealing with, was seeing all of these people so scared.
Well, I'm really grateful that you brought that up because I'm going to ask you to help me to understand. Now, I think that being trained in the law, I don't have the anxiety because I think we learn how to compartmentalize what's going on in the law and the legal arguments and the like in kind of an academic or compartmentalized way. I mean, you and I both know that when we go to trial and we stand up for somebody, we are 100% there for them. We stand for them or for something, and then the jury goes out and they come back and you either win or you lose, and you go home and you celebrate or you cry for a night and you get up in the next morning and yet it's the next case and it's the next case, and we kind of learn how to do that. But I do have some concerns, and maybe we could talk to that and address it. I do have concerns about a scenario in the upcoming election where, because maybe some civil unrest occurs at a few sites, that there's a declaration of martial law, and that the election is allegedly suspended for a short period of time, but that short period of time never expires. So I do have that concern, but you say that you feel like that those concerns might be misplaced. I'm anxious to hear about that.
Well, I don't mean to dismiss those concerns, because
Mm,
the concerns themselves are real, whether or not there is a foundation in the law that
mm,
would give rise to that actually happening. So the first thing that I would say, and for your listeners, as sort of a refresher, is that it's really, really important to remember that in our Constitution, the states run the elections, even federal election. And I know you know that, but that's a
mm.
reminder that a lot of people either have forgotten from high school civics or maybe never even knew. But the federal government has very little that it can do in terms of state elections, which of course is why you are seeing Trump getting more and more desperate as he tries to meddle with the state elections and the voter rolls, and he is being refused at every turn. And in fact, just today, well, to back up, so earlier this week, no, we have to back up even more. Okay. So, first, the Supreme Court, he tried to get the Supreme Court to say that if mail-in ballots, because mail-in voting is his big thing, right?
Mhm.
Even though he did it himself. And so,
Right.
first he tries to get the Supreme Court to say that it is illegal for states such as Mississippi to count mail-in ballots, even if they have been postmarked by election day. In other words, he was trying to say, well, they have to be counted by election day, whereas most of the states who have mail-in balloting, and I'm in Colorado where we have widespread mail-in balloting, most of the states, the rule is as long as it's postmarked by election day, because that's when the vote is cast. And you have to think about the fact that it's only been very recent in our history that votes were tallied the same day, with electronic voting, right? I mean, back in, when the countries first started having elections, it could take quite a while for the ballots to be counted. And there were soldiers out in the field who, it could take quite a while. But he tried to get Trump and his administration were trying to get the Supreme Court to say, well, to invalidate basically any states counting ballots that were not actually postmarked by election day. Well, the Supreme Court said no, that's still perfectly legal. So first there was the Supreme Court thing, then his executive order trying to force the states to reveal their voter rolls. The courts smacked that down. And so that's strike two. And then the courts invalidated, the post office was trying to give effect to that executive order by saying, we will only process mail-in ballots from states that give up their voter rolls through the special post office portal. Well, the courts then said no to that. So that's strike three. And, most people know that three strikes and you're out, but Trump is actually getting more and
More
more
than three
scared,
strikes.
right?
Well,
Well, he's getting more than
that,
three strikes, but also he's getting very scared. So then he sent the letter earlier this week. His DOJ sent the letter to all 50 states saying that here are the federal rules that you have to go by, the federal law for an election, because that's pretty much the only way the federal government is involved in elections is, federal election law. And you have 5 days to respond, uh, attesting to the fact that you are following all of these laws. Now, I am sure that is also going to be challenged in court. It just happened this week, but I'm sure. So that's, there's potentially the fourth strike. Um, and then let's see, there was a fifth one. What was it? Oh, God, I can't even remember. Oh, the SAVE Act. He has tried so hard, to get the SAVE Act passed that he's actually refusing to sign a bipartisan housing bill unless they pass the SAVE Act, which his own party has told him they don't have the votes. So that's the fifth one. And then just today,
the thing is though that the only reason that it's not passing is that they don't have the votes.
yes,
If they got the votes, and we're only talking about 3 Republicans that need to go back and align with their party, they could pass the Save America Act. And then we have a problem. But let me just push back a little bit on what you're saying, because I 100% agree with you that legally he doesn't have a pot to urinate in. He does not have that. But 17 states have voluntarily turned over their voter rolls.
yes.
And that means that in those 17 states, since they are cooperating and doing what he wants them to do voluntarily, he could very easily purge all of the Democrats off of those rolls, return them to the states. And if the states agree to use those rolls, the Democrats will show up on election day, and they won't be able to vote because they're not on the rolls. Again, I understand that constitutionally he doesn't have any rights, but the country is founded on our confidence, trust, and consent to be ruled by law. And if the court, matter of fact, I just started my summer course in business law, and
Mhm.
I had the class on there, and I always start off by asking this question. Um, if the Supreme Court orders the president to do something, and the president says, I'm not going to do it, what happens? And to a one, each student said, well, he has to. He has to comply with the Supreme Court. If it's gone all the way through the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court's the last one, he has to comply with it. And I said, what's going to make him comply with it? I mean, the Supreme Court has a bailiff and he has the Secret Service. How are they going to send a bailiff over there and force him to do it? And of course, everybody says, I don't know the answer. And of course, the answer is, we don't know the answer either. So although you are completely accurate that legally we should not be worried, does that alleviate our anxiety that he could force the issue by
See,
brute force?
I'm not as maybe I'm Pollyannic or you're cynical, or both can be true. But to unpack that first, the
Hmm?
17 states that have given him their voter rolls, if he were to return them so purged, there would immediately be a court challenge, because that would be absolutely illegal. And that would be him messing with the voter rolls. I mean, I have
Mm-hmm.
great faith in our court system, right? Even more now than I did last year, because
Mm-hmm.
the courts are really holding the line. And not you personally, but the greater public is not necessarily seeing that, because of course a whole lot of the news networks are basically in his pocket now, and so they're not telling you. What they're telling you is, oh, radical judges, right? But not only are the courts by and large holding the line, and it's not true that this administration just simply ignores court orders. They certainly do their best to sort of go to the edge, but they are by and large, for the most part, abiding by court orders. But also, we are seeing more and more that the judges are getting so fed up with his antics and his DOJ's antics. And when I say his DOJ, just this week, someone appointed by Trump, a judge that's a Trump appointee, came right out and said the quiet part out loud, and said, I don't remember the exact wording, but in essence said, this is Trump's DOJ. And then, I don't know if you saw this opinion, Bob, but then the same judge, I've never seen this before. He broke the fourth wall. He spoke directly to the people. He said, you, the people, have to understand that what this administration is trying to do, I don't care whether you voted for Trump or you didn't, and what party you're in, you have to understand. This was the case about the subpoenas that the DOJ was trying to serve on the Georgia election workers. And never mind, the statute had already run, but they were trying to get at their personal information, their personal phone numbers, their personal email addresses. And so this judge said, you, the people, speaking directly to the people, have to understand the incredible intrusion in your personal privacy that this administration is trying to perpetrate. And this is a Trump appointee. So my point is that I have even more faith in the courts now than I did ever before, that they are going to hold the line. So that's about whether he takes the voter rolls and then returns them. But with respect to the Supreme Court, if it came down, now, first of all, I mean, that's such an unlikely scenario that a Supreme Court would say, you, Donald Trump, have to do this, versus, the law doesn't permit it, or the law requires it.
Mm-hmm.
But even if it did, I mean, I think that the first answer is impeachment. If you're the president of the United States and you are not going to carry out, that's your job number one, is to carry out the laws of the United States. And when the Supreme Court says something, that's the law of the United States. And if you're not going to do that, you're going to get impeached.
Well, their votes are there.
I
If the votes are there.
even with this, and
I
especially
mean, he got
come
impeached.
November.
He got impeached twice,
Right.
and
So
he
yes,
wasn't
impeachment
convicted.
and removal. More and more, I think that we are seeing the cracks, and I think you and I probably both. I know I predicted it, and I'm sure that you probably did too. That the further it went, the more the cracks in the unified front of the Republican Senate would start showing, and you've started seeing some cracks. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? He's not doing himself any favors by primarying out people who are still going to be in office, because they're the ones that are speaking out now. They have no skin left to lose in the game, right? The Republicans, who have been ousted basically in the primaries by him. I mean, that was a very stupid move on his part. Thank goodness. Um,
Absolutely.
so,
Well, let me just
yeah.
wait. Let me just hold. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to play devil's advocate. I wanted to push you a little bit, because I also agree with you that there is more strength in the system, and that the guardrails, although perhaps weakened, are not vacant. And I think that we can see that, or people that aren't as familiar with the system as we might be, can see that in a situation where, for example, you have a kidnapping. and the agents, your regular special agents on the ground who are going to be doing the investigating, they're still doing exactly what the FBI was always reputed to do. They do good work. They go and do their investigations. They do their crime scene stuff, and things move along just as they always had, regardless of the fact that we may have some crackpots that are leading them in DC. The guys on the ground are still doing the work that they need to do. And I think that you're right. We can still have faith and confidence that the great majority of the system is unaffected by the craziness of this upper echelon people that we might call in the Epstein class. They still don't affect because most civil servants, they want to do the right thing.
Yes.
And trying to change the whole culture of the government is like trying to turn an oil tanker. The administration might be pushing it and they might be pushing it in a direction, but it takes a long time. And I think you're absolutely right. By the time it gets to the point where people go, oh my gosh, we really might lose something, that's when they'll buck up and find their backbone, so to speak. So there's that.
I
So,
absolutely agree. I also want to say that, and
mhm.
again, I feel like this is a very short-sighted thing that he has done by firing all of these really good people. Like, basically, they're getting rid of or have gotten rid of the people who have a backbone and who are ethical and moral and who are actually dedicated to our country, service to our country. And by getting rid of all of them, they are now being hired by state agencies and by the law firms, the very law firms that he went after. So he's basically released a whole pool of lawyers and judges and, the people, the very people who are going to be his downfall. He has enabled them to be on the other side and to come back. And you know what? They know where everything's hidden. They know the weak spots. So again, I'm very
Yeah,
hopeful because of that.
yeah, no, and I think you have a right to be. I want to ask you a little bit to tell us a little bit about the network that you have evolved. This crazy, great network of wonderful folks who have inside information. I don't know if the inside information is the right exact term, but maybe deeper than public knowledge.
Hmm.
You have a network of folks that know a little bit more than is generally reported, especially about things like the Epstein files and the like. And so, how did you develop that network, and who are these folks, and what confidence and support do you feel you get from seeing these people at work?
I wish I could tell you the formula because if I could, I could write a book on it, on how to, network like that because it isn't something that I necessarily set out to create. Like, I never thought I need to create a network of people and surround myself with them and connect myself to them. It's more just happened one at a time in a way that uh, I have a lot of confidence in reaching out to people, and I'm very committed, very, very strongly committed to only presenting information that I know to be true and that I have verified. And so when I am working on a story or, you know, sort of when I've uncovered something, I have zero fear about reaching out to someone, whoever they may be, whether they're, a congressperson or another journalist or the CEO of something. And I think that is the answer to your question.
Hmm.
I haven't really ever thought about it, but I have been extraordinarily fortunate that people that they trust me and that they will dialogue with me. And I just came off a show that I did with the investigator. He's Peabody Award and Murrow Award winning investigative journalist Zev Shalev, and he and I actually came across each other on Substack. because he also publishes on Substack, and we just clicked, and he's, I think, one of the people that you would be talking about now, that
Hmm.
is a very credible source. I think I also, the more prominent, position I have come into, the more people come to me, and I have a pretty good detector, I think, and sense of who is the real deal and who is just sort of blowing smoke, trying to promote themselves or trying to even give me misinformation. And so I sort of quickly dispatch people like that. And again, I don't know if I'm really answering your question because I've
No, no,
never really.
you absolutely are.
Okay.
It in a funny way. Um, you are describing what I would call the positive mirror of the network that Jeffrey Epstein evolved. Just
Yeah.
on the other side. I mean, my understanding is that Epstein started out relatively unknown and made one connection, and that connection led to another connection, and he just had that ability and skill to create a sense of camaraderie, although I want to be clear that we're talking about a camaraderie for not such great purposes and reasons,
Right.
but he had a way of connecting with these folks, and one led to another, led to another, led to another, and he has a sense of capitalizing on it. And what you're telling me is that as you have developed these relationships of people that can provide you with helpful and authentic information, you became one with a reputation for authenticity, and so people came to trust you, and that just builds and builds. I would just throw this little anecdote in. Um, when I left the Janet Reno's office in Miami, we had hit the mob for 76 million bucks, and I hung my shingle out, and one of the Gambino captains had come to visit me within 2 weeks, he and he basically said, we've got some pretty good lawyers, and you were able to beat them. Now we want to send you some clients, and so. Well, he could recognize good lawyering, but anyway, we had a conversation about ethics and not crossing the line. And I simply said to him, Johnny, you want to have a lawyer that's respected by the court and whose word is accepted as gospel by the court, because that's in your best interest. Something that might take 3 or 4 or 5 weeks to go where I need to develop proof, if the court will accept my word on something, I can move it along much more quickly. And
Yes.
he saw the advantage of that, and we agreed on what our red lines were going to be, and so we were able to have a very uh, good relationship, a lawyer-client relationship that didn't make me have to cross any lines. And so the reputation is just so important, and how wonderful that you were able to build up one.
Oh, well, I really appreciate that. I will say that one of the major differences between my network and Epstein's is that I don't have compromising information on any of the people with whom I have in my network that I can take them down with, like Epstein managed to amass, to blackmail
That
them.
that raises in my mind a wonderful thought, and the thought is that within the human breast there is a desire to do right and to do right by your neighbor that is as strong as the desire to get power and wealth, just depending on, I guess, how you were brought up, and what you've learned and what life has handed you.
Right.
But that what I'm hearing you say is that desire for people to do the right thing is as motivational as it is on the other side to gain power and wealth.
I think so. I mean, I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but I think that that's right. Either you are moral and ethical and draw lines and boundaries, or you cross those lines, and once you've done that, I think it's very easy to continue doing that. We have no idea whether Epstein started out with a damaged moral compass, but he certainly had one towards the end.
Mhm. Certainly. So can you share with us some stuff we don't know
About what?
about Epstein and his systems? Or yes, I guess if I knew the answer to your question about what, I wouldn't be able to ask the question. Can you tell us something that we don't know?
Well, I think that actually, at least some people, if not many or most people, don't know. Everybody, the sensational news about Epstein has been always about the women, the girls, the survivors, the victims. And people seem surprised to learn that that was not even at all the primary focus of the Epstein circle. It was almost like a side gig. It was almost an afterthought. The actual real event is and was and still is, just without Epstein, the meeting together of very powerful, very rich people to manipulate world economies and world governments and the defense of various countries. And we know this because we have the evidence. And for example, and I think I may have mentioned this before when we spoke, we have a 3-hour secret recording of a secret meeting between Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak and Larry Summers. And at the time of this meeting, Ehud Barak was still in power as the defense minister of Israel. So here's a conversation between these three. It was a secret dinner meeting that was secretly recorded. And what they are talking about is, again, the manipulation of economies and of governments and, talking about the defense of different countries. And the very fact that Ehud Barak is saying the things that he's saying while he is the sitting defense minister of a country, and he's saying these things openly, in secret, but openly to Jeffrey Epstein and Larry Summers, very strongly suggests. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, and there are, a lot of people who think that Epstein was an agent or perhaps even a double agent of Israel and Russia and maybe the U.S., so that would make him a triple agent. Whether or not he was any of that, it's extremely clear that he was an asset of some sort because Barack was taking him into his confidence in the things he was saying in this conversation, which then leads to, there are people who believe either that Epstein was, it wasn't a suicide or that he's still alive. And, I am firmly convinced that he is dead. But also, when you are an asset and you are compromised, you either need to take yourself out or you will be taken out, because the government secrets you have, they cannot afford for you to try and cut a deal once you have been arrested and are going to court in order to save your own neck.
Mm-hmm.
So people may not know that.
Mm. So sometimes um, you might it might be played with that ultimately the purpose that powerful and wealthy people have to gain power and influence, if you give them the greatest benefit of the doubt, would be to say, I actually do know how to run the world as a better place. And if only I had the absolute power to do the things the way that I know they will be better, I could make the world a better place for everybody. I could run this place and I could do it well and everybody would benefit. I just got to get to the point where I have full and complete power.
Mhm.
If you want to give them the absolute benefit of the doubt, sometimes I don't know if their internal morality or North Star rises to even that level. Um, but as far as Jeffrey Epstein himself, I don't have any illusions. I don't at least have any illusions that he had any interest in doing good for anybody other than to ensure the longevity of his wealth and power.
Oh,
How do you feel
absolutely.
about that?
No, there is no doubt that there was not even though he had this mask and shell of being a philanthropist. And he did indeed donate a lot of money to a lot of good causes. There is just zero doubt that his power and control was all about not just him, but his network. And it's very clear that he really, really enjoyed being able to say that he could pick up the phone and get so and so on the phone. He enjoyed being perceived as a man of great power and connection and wealth. And if there is anyone, I can't imagine there is, but if there is anyone who is doubting whether his moral compass was so broken, well, then I refer you to that, the side gig of the girls, which, again, there's just zero doubt that, of what he was doing. And, I've had uh, the privilege of having access to certain documents just because I have uncovered them that other people or very few other people have seen. Documents where he's working with a press. A PR agent in order to try to make, during the height of his, the Florida investigation, which were you there at that time? Is that when you were in
I,
Florida?
I was in Florida through the 80s.
Okay, through the 80s. So, but that during the time when leading up to the deal that was cut in Florida with the non-prosecution agreement and his, basically work release. And by the way, did you know that he had work release, right? He was
Hmm.
allowed to leave the facilities every
Hmm.
day and go to this made up office, the Florida Science Foundation. Um, did you know that he had a sex bed in the back of the SUV that he took to and from every day?
I don't
I
doubt it.
mean, it's all so mind-boggling, but anyway, there can be zero doubt that he knew, again, he had a press agent to try to rehabilitate his image as someone who never knew that the girls were underage. And, he was really this upstanding, and he thought his money would protect him, right? He's such a philanthropist. But of course, the reality, as all of the evidence shows, is that he not only knew, but that's what he was looking for. He was essentially running a pyramid scheme or a multi-level marketing scheme. Like if you think of Amway or Avon or Tupperware, only it's underage girls giving massages, right? If one person came, he would pay them, and then he would say, hey, if you recruit more people of your friends who are all in high school with you, I will pay you for recruiting them. I mean, and it's just so there's zero doubt. There is just no doubt in it in anyone's mind that he had a very broken moral compass, if he had one at all. But he really seemed to enjoy playing the part of a very highly connected philanthropist.
Mm.
And he was highly connected, but those connections were the connections with whom he was jointly manipulating all these, the global economies, which
So,
again is still going
mhm.
on.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that mostly we think about the sex trafficking as a business in and of itself. In other words, that he gained power and they gained wealth by trafficking women. But what you're saying is that it wasn't just about wealth, it was about influence and
I'm not,
gaining influence and using the women as a mechanism for having compromising information on people, which allowed him to get referrals for additional influence and the like.
well, so what I'm saying is, I mean, all the signs point to that, but we have not yet seen the actual evidence. Now, you and I both know that if you can put enough pieces together and if it looks like a rat and smells like a rat and, squeaks like a rat, it's probably a rat. But we don't actually have the evidence. The DOJ may, the FBI may, but we have not yet uncovered the hard evidence, the compromising images and videos, because when the FBI raided, especially his Manhattan apartment, an apartment, I got to tell you what, it was more than 40 rooms and it had at least 6 or 8 floors. I mean, it's really kind of silly to call it an apartment. But anyway,
Apartment.
that's where the CDs and the hard drives were, and uh, as far as we know, the FBI still has them, and
Mhm.
so almost nobody knows what's actually on there. We all assume it's blackmailable evidence, but we don't. We can't really know for certain as nobody's actually seen it or described it. But so in terms of the women, the trafficking of the women, we don't really know, at least as far as I'm aware, how much that contributed to his wealth. I mean, he was moving massive amounts of money between all these different accounts and through all these shell accounts, and we do have all of that information, and none of that had anything to do with trafficking
Money
women.
laundering here.
It
Uh, c-
absolutely money laundering.
converting money that could not be explained to money that could be explained and therefore invested into legitimate enterprises once it was cleaned.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. And a
Let me ask you if can I let me ask you
absolutely.
to engage with me in a thought experiment.
All right.
Okay, with what you know about all of this, if these activities were allowed to play themselves out to, I don't know if there ever would be an end to it, or it would be just something going on. But if they were allowed to play themselves out so that the ultimate goal of the players in the Epstein class came to fruition, what would that world look like?
Assuming there was an identifiable end goal.
Uh, that is the question, because this is maybe an addiction that you just have to have more and more and more. And the amount that you had yesterday isn't enough to satisfy you today.
Right.
And it just takes that road until it doesn't have any end, until it self-destructs. Um,
And what you're describing, other than the self-destruct part, up
mhm,
until then, is what I think we are seeing playing out in real time with our current president.
mhm.
And so I think that what it would look like on a more global scale would be simply a replication of what's going on right now with Trump, with all of the other people in that cabal. Um, you
So what
know,
we're talking about is basically a world where, I mean, my evaluation of what's going on with Trump is that he pretty much has convinced himself that he can have or has had or has acquired anything or everything that he places any value on. And now he's trying simply to create more value by building the Arc de Triomphe or building the reflecting pool. Or, I mean, he's just doing all of these things because he's trying to get that initial high that he got, when he made his first million. and it's just not working. And so he's unsatisfiable. So what would the world look like if that was replicated all over the world? It would be chaos.
Well, and I'm thinking more about the finance part and the money.
Hmm.
I mean, there was that public release of information about how much he has taken in from, I think the crypto was, if I have that right. I didn't actually look at it very deeply. Um, but that's just a tip of the iceberg. He has amassed so much money since he took office. It's, as we said earlier, it's just it I'm certain that it's criminal at some point. I mean, and the lawsuit against the IRS, I mean,
Hmm.
and the weaponization relief fund, or I mean, all
Yeah.
of those things, like, he's basically trying everything he can to get as much money as he can. And now he's got his kids involved in it, right? And so I think the answer to your question of what that looks like for the entire, again, quote unquote, Epstein class, or the elite, whatever you want to call this group of people, is that you have several of these people, each at the very top of their government or country, or whatever that structure is, who look very much like Trump, who have amassed a huge amount of wealth. And basically they seem to be taking the too big to fail model to an individual level. And that's where I even think the goal is. It's never enough. It's just to keep getting enough money to the point where, there's no other money out, very little money. I mean, I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but, where
Hmm.
basically they have all the money and
Hmm.
they have all of the valuable assets, and to hell with everyone else. And we are definitely seeing that here, and we're starting to see it more clearly in other places as well.
Yeah. It's the simple question that you wonder why they don't ask, like, who's going to fix my car?
Mhm. Yep.
Once I have taken all of the money, and the economic system is in chaos, the services that I literally need, um, I've I've impacted in such a way that you know. What is the Faustian question? I would rather be a king in hell than a servant in heaven.
Yeah, I think that they got that a bit backwards, because I'd much rather be a servant in heaven. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
it's
I
that
would too,
Faustian
but I
bargain.
think that's what
Yeah,
that's what Faust said,
right.
and it's something else. There's another thing that I'd ask you about. You and I are very very sensitive to the idea of conflict of interest, and lawyers have these two levels of ethics. That that transgression which will cause you to be punished, and those things that you should aspire to. They're not
Mhm.
punishable, but we hope that you would rise to these aspirations, but you can't fall below this level.
Right.
And
Right.
okay. And we also very, very, very sensitive to conflicts of interest. And I mean, if that's not drummed into us in the first year of law school, I don't know what it is. If I represent this person and there's any possibility that in order to represent them, I might impact negatively another client, I got to beg off. And no, not, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Um, but this conflict of interest, that these violations of conflict of interest that we're seeing today, are so blatant and they're so obvious, and yet it doesn't seem to me that the population in general understands the conflict enough or is not offended by it. I mean, we have Jared Kushner, who is receiving literally billions of dollars of investment from the Saudis and is representing the United States in negotiations versus the Saudis. and there's not a huge sense that this just ain't right. So I wonder if you could speak to, conflict of interest and what it means and what we're seeing today and why folks ought to be upset by it.
Well, first of all, I think folks are upset by it, but they are just so bewildered by the magnitude of it and they
Mm.
don't have a sense that there's anything they can do. They feel kind of powerless, but
Uh-huh.
also this administration has been so good about creating so many diversions and distractions, and things that rise to an even higher level of absurdity than the conflicts, that I think that at least some people, they look at that and they go, God, that's got to be a conflict of interest of some sort, but we don't even know if that's illegal. Whereas this other thing, which is huge over here, they're shooting immigrants, and U.S. citizens, and that I think that the attention is just too, um, being spread too thin, and so that they can only hold in their head. Generally, I'm talking about the public now, uh,
Hmm.
a few things at a time,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they
yeah.
have to triage them, and
Hmm.
so I think there's that. And I mean, speaking of distractions, every time, I mean, they just today dropped some more UFO files, right? I mean, and that's a distraction, right? And so,
Uh-huh.
and it's always watch this hand over here while the other hand here is like picking our pocket. I mean, literally picking the pocket of the taxpayer. So I think part of it is that I think it's not that they don't care or even recognize it, but I mean, frankly, I don't even know what the actual laws are about conflict of interest in the way that you describe what's going on with Kushner, just because I haven't looked it up. Do you know? Is there actually a law? Because if there's a law that is actually being violated, you can be sure that there is some democracy group already getting ready to file the lawsuit. They have been doing such a brilliant job. Democracy Docket and the Washington Litigation Group,
Mm.
which is that's actually their
Elias's
name, the
group.
Washington. Yep.
Yeah.
Um, I have every confidence that if something that they're doing is illegal, there's going to be a lawsuit, and the odds are very good that the courts are going to hold them to account. The issue is where there isn't an actual law or the law isn't very clear. And so I predict that once we do take back the Congress, which I am confident we will in my lifetime, maybe not in November, maybe not even for a few years, but I'm confident that we will. There's going to be a statutory reckoning where all the things that they have gotten away with and are getting away with now, those loopholes will be closed. And it's really important, I think, also to remember that for every decision that comes out now that you don't like, you have to remember that when we take it all back, it's going to apply to our president also. I mean,
Right.
the decisions are party neutral.
Hmm. Um, I have a concern about, let's say hypothetically that we take back both houses in November. When I say we, I mean the Democrats take back both houses. And of course, I identify as a Democrat. So I mean, just in full disclosure, um, we, um, so when that happens, my father was very fond of a saying, and I I'm not sure who the author was, perhaps Voltaire, but he was very fond of this saying, the victim becomes the executioner. And I am concerned that there will be such pent up desire to hold folks accountable that we're going to rush into it and at least appear and perceive to be no better than the other side uh, going after our political opponents. And I think that there's a definite distinction. I mean, it's one thing to go after Joe Biden's son, and for whatever he did, and he was convicted of it, and you had that. It's another thing to have, as you mentioned, so many things that border the firing of the misappropriation of funds, the taking of funds that were appropriated for one thing and appropriating for something else, the funds that they needed to retrofit the jet, the luxury jet that he's flying in now. Those funds
That
were
he's being told
appropriated
not to use
to
now
use,
by his Secret
right,
Service, right?
right. Those funds were appropriated to upgrade our nuclear missile defense system. And they were misappropriated. Now that is illegal. The Congress has the purse strings. And so those things are all going to be subject to Senate and oversight investigations, and they're going to be subject. There's so many of them. It's going to look like a vendetta. And I'm just worried that I hope that we can find the appropriate balance point between appropriate consequences and um, appearing to be on a vendetta. Is a concern. What do you think?
I hear your concern. I think that's less likely to happen because I think that part of the reason we are in this situation right now is that, generally speaking, as a party, the Democrats are too damn nice. And I don't mean they should viciously go after opponents. That isn't what I mean. But
Mhm.
I mean, they're just kind of too nice and not even respectful, because I always want respect, but too nice for their own good, in as much as they don't want to offend. And so I think a perfect example of that is what is happening now with Plattner, right? I mean, the Democrats didn't, they wanted to give him a chance. Even after it became pretty clear that they should have said, hey, we're really sorry, we need to run another candidate, because they're the party of second, third, fourth, and fifth chances. And
Mhm.
so I mean, it could look like a vendetta, in as much as, even if they as nicely as possible brought to brought to the law all the people that deserve to be brought to the law from this administration, the litany of the number
The
of people,
litany.
it would make it look like a vendetta.
Yeah.
So I could see that,
Mhm.
the optics, but I don't think that in reality, I don't see them, coming with torches and pitchforks out for blood.
And I agree. I don't know. I think that they will be on solid ground. It's like I often feel that there is a false equivalency when people talk about the extreme left and the extreme right. And they say, well, both sides are extreme. And again, full disclosure, I'm a Democrat and I lean left, and that's true. But looking at it factually, I don't think that there really is an equivalency between what is defined as the extreme right, which is MAGA and militias and insurrectionists.
Hmm.
Is anybody would define the extreme right as that. And over on this side, you have political correctness junkies, who are
Hmm.
getting mad at you because you call somebody Oriental instead of Asian.
Hmm.
And I mean, I just don't see those as equivalent extremisms. I just don't,
No, I don't either.
factually. And I think that we have a tendency to want to be fair, but the two sides are not equivalent to each other.
No.
And they're just not. I mean, it's one thing to accuse a group of being too nice. It's another to accuse a group of being too violent. And
Exactly.
there's just a difference.
There is.
Um, So, Anne, we're running up on an hour. It's been a fascinating conversation. I want to notes from the front. I want to say that name again, and I want people to write your name down. Of course, it'll be in the show notes. If you want to keep up with what's happening, you want to get an inside view of what's going on with all of these things, you need to subscribe to Ann's blog. Follow it. She does a
Thank you.
great job. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time with all that you do to come on the show and give us your perspective and wisdom on things.
Oh, my goodness. First of all, thank you so much for having me and for the very kind words, which mean a great deal coming from you because you know, and you have the same, sort of background, and so you understand, and that means a great deal to me. And yeah, I would welcome anyone who wants to. I do want to make a point of saying that if you want to sign up, it is Notes from the Front on Substack, but it's under my name because someone
Mm-hmm.
else already had Notes from the Front
Oh.
dot Substack taken,
Mm.
even though they're doing nothing with it. So I just wanted to point that out. It's absolutely free to subscribe, and I would welcome your people, and you're doing such great work, Bob. I am just very appreciative of the work that you're doing here.
Thank you. Well, before we start getting into a mutual acclamation society here, let me say
Right.
again, thank you so much. And everybody, this is the flow. We try to put the edge on Wednesdays, but on Monday we do the flow calm waters where we try to take the edge off a little bit. So if you want something that's uplifting to help you get through the week, tune in on a Monday for the flow calm waters. Thank you, Ann, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.